back, everyone. I hope everything looks and sounds good. We've got a bit of new equipment in the studio here, some of which I'm not 100% thrilled with. Um, I was really hoping. I've got a newer yoga here from one of the older systems we used to use, and I was really hoping that I'd be able to do everything in 4K with it. I actually get reasonable latency 4K video out of the camera. I'm using my old OnePlus 7 Pro at this point, but the Intel graphics in this laptop on the 8th gen i5 just don't quite keep up. You guys don't want to watch 11 FPS 4K. And I'd love to say I could use my P1, which I think I used last time, but OBS 28 doesn't support NDI yet. So, here we are. Obviously, I decided that the last footage I recorded with the Panasonic AW-HE50 was a no-go. Other bits and pieces that are a bit abnormal, I've got one of the VisionTech docks under the laptop to give it a wired Ethernet connection. I also have one of the VisionTech docks attached to my OnePlus 7 Pro. And the reason I'm using it instead of the Cat S62 Pro I had been using is I was hoping that its USB Gen 3 Type-C would handle 4K output better than the USB Gen 2 Type-C that the Cat has. And this is literally the first time I've plugged something in and gone, you know what, 2.0 on the phone's not fast enough, I need Type 3. And it is, but the laptop here can't quite handle it. So with that said, I'm going to cut for 1 second because I don't think I'm recording at quite the bit rate I wanted to be. Alright, now that I've bumped that a little, let's get to what we have today, and that is this pair of SD cards. I'm kidding. These are just 128 gig Class 1 U3 SD cards, and those go with these, which are a pair of Reolink cameras. In fact, you can see here that they look fairly similar, but there's one key difference. This one is a PoE model, and this is a Wi-Fi model, and essentially they're the same camera, just one with PoE and one with Wi-Fi. This is actually my first instance interacting with Reolink, and I do want to be upfront. They did send these out. They also sent these cards because I was curious to see what kind of cards they would actually send. These are their certified cards that they sell, and these look fairly generic. I don't think there's anything special with these, but I'm going to run them through a test. I want to see if they're high endurance cards, and obviously we're going to look at where they go in these. So let's start with the one I'm honestly more excited about, the PoE model. And this is retail. They shipped it actually from Amazon, amusingly enough. And it still has its do not accept if seal is broken sticker on it. So I'm going to cut it. I guess you shouldn't accept it now. Oh, you know what? Let's get a look at anything exciting on the box. Dual lens, wide viewing angle, smart alarm, detection, PoE, plug and play, easy remote access, all that normal stuff. 2-year limited warranty, which is nice. I normally deploy Amcrest cameras, which only come with a 1-year warranty, and it looks like they have their own Reolink Live View app. However, I believe these will show up on the network as standard cameras, and I can just connect them to Blue Iris or whatever may be your choice. Alright, so we've got Be Better Prepared, Be Reolink, which is weird branding, but okay. Some notes about their NVRs. They do sell hardware-based NVRs, telling you that you need to update the firmware if you have specific models. That's a good note to have, because some of their older NVRs probably work just fine with these, but could need a firmware update. One of these 24-hour surveillance stickers. I don't like sticking those on the house. Let's see, little self-adhesive mounting template for drilling holes in the building. the waterproof lid installation guide. I'll get a look at that in a second. And the quick start guide, which it looks like the quick start guide is the same. It says applies to Reolink Duo 2, PoE, and Wi-Fi. What's in the box? Camera, antenna, etc. Some asterisks about some of this stuff is only in the PoE, some of the stuff is only in the Wi-Fi. Nothing too abnormal there. This is interesting. So they've got pretty typical cheap foam here, like the kind you see in just about everything. But then they have slightly nicer foam on top of it, whose whole goal was to hold those booklets. That seems like an odd choice of cost. Like, this foam is perfectly fine and has held in our 1 meter Ethernet cable, our fairly typical looking screw kit, and this comes with a couple of things. We get some concrete or drywall anchors, an Allen key, a little pin that I assume is for security, and then just both normal inch or so screws to put it in the wall, as well as some screws to bolt everything together, but those are all Phillips. Alright, and then we have the camera itself, which this is heavy. Alright, and let's see, the waterproofing kit, a Phillips screwdriver. This screwdriver is not going to win any awards, but good on them for including one. And that's all the stuff in the box. So let's get a look at our camera. And the thing that stands out to me is this is a dual sensor camera, which I have mixed feelings about. Conceptually, not conceptually, I have a love-hate relationship with the idea, and I'm going to find out how well it works once I hook it up to Blue Iris. And the reason for that is this solves one of the issues that I've had with other cameras, but potentially causes a new one. So, traditional camera, like the Amcrest dome cams that I've shown previously, and I'll put a link to that video below, has like a 90-ish degree field of view. A little bit larger than that. I want to say some of them are between 93 and 97, depending on the exact focal length. And that's fine, but that only covers so wide of an area. So this, being dual sensor, has a 150 degree field of view. Now, there's some trade-offs here that I think are going to cause trouble for people if they try and use this at the extremes. And that is, as you get further from a sensor's center field of view, you get less detail. And I wish I had a really good way to explain that. You see it, they complain about it in photography sites where they're looking at lenses, cheaper lenses especially. As you get further off of your center, things start to go a little bit out of focus. And that's just related to the angle of light coming in relative to the sensor. The sensor is flat, the lens is curved. Something that's directly in line with the sensor, it gets distorted less than something that's like 50 degrees off center that now has to come across this curve. So depending on what you're doing, some things tend to be not quite as readable when they're out of the center. Well, this is going to have a wider field of view without causing as much distortion, but it also isn't going to have a perfect clear center line that I think could throw some people off. So you're going to have this oddity where it's going to generate a 150 degree wide picture that has a clear spot here and a clear spot here with a slightly less sharp center zone. Now, depending on their software, depending on the chip that's in here, and depending on whatever settings are in here, that could be a complete non-issue. That could be a nightmare. And I won't know till I plug it in. But I just want to be upfront about that. That is probably the part on this that surprises me the most. Now, this has a great advantage sticking it on a corner or something where it can see 150 degrees, whereas with the Amcrest domes, I'd probably normally deploy 2 of them. So for what I think is like $100 some odd dollar camera, that is avoiding some cost, potentially for a trade-off that people may be making. And I'm just double checking the price here because I don't remember off the top of my head. And it looks like this is $135, and I think the Wi-Fi version is similar. Yeah. So anyway, this is a $135 camera. Those Amcrests are normally like $100. Now, what I don't see in any of this documentation, or at least I didn't, was any of the resolutions, troubleshooting. Yeah, there's a troubleshooting section. Picture's not clear. Check it for dirt. Point the camera to a well-lit area. Upgrade the firmware. Restore the camera to factory settings. Check again. IR 30 meters. Spotlight 6 3.5 watt 6500 Kelvin spotlights. I don't see frequency or resolution diagram, which is a bummer because I know they listed on the Amazon listing, but to not include that on any of the packaging is troublesome. It claims to be a 4K camera, or an 8 megapixel camera, I should say. And the thing with that is there's a trade-off between resolution and resolution and frame rate. So this one, let's just bring it up on the Amazon listing because they didn't include it in the box. Multiple recording options. So the default is 4608 by 1728, which is 8 megapixels at 20 frames a second. That's actually fairly reasonable for a security camera. Typically, you find about 15 to 20 is good enough for most of those applications. Personally, I'd probably trade a little bit of that resolution, get somewhere closer to 3840 by 2160, traditional 16:9, although it's got the dual sensor thing going, so maybe I wouldn't go for that. But just step it down one bin. Usually that gets me like 25 frames a second. The Amcrests, which are also 8 megapixel cameras I talked about, I think those have to go down 2 or 3 steps from their advertised resolution, but they're also an older design. Alright, so I've rambled enough. Let's go ahead and start taking this apart. And it looks like I can probably do most of this with the included screwdriver. So presumably, the top of the camera, no screws. There is a mounting point for this bracket that's included, which I like that this comes out and then latches in. That's convenient. But you can secure this either to the top or bottom of the camera, although I do see something I don't like about this mounting solution. It looks like, well, let's switch to the other camera. So moving over here, looking at the camera, you can see that there are 2 holes here and an additional hole there. And we've got an inverted version of that on the top. The mounting fixture included only includes a single screw and does not include any pins or a second retaining lug here, which would prevent the camera from being rotated once it's in this mount. So I think that is a miss to just rely on the friction between this plastic and the camera's housing, which is also plastic. In fact, yeah, I would have thought it would be aluminum, although they're not impact rated or anything like that. So you definitely want to make sure that these are mounted out of where someone could conceivably grab or hit them, and far enough up that you're not going to be able to easily adjust that with like a baseball bat. Anyway, so there's 2 screws here, which gets me micro SD card access, and that's actually convenient. This is far less disassembly than some of the other cameras I've looked at just to get to the micro SD card slot. So that's 2 screws, and then there's a card slot. That's nice. And then there's 1 screw here. And was that enough to loosen anything? I don't think so, but I don't see. Aha! So, under these labels, I can feel holes for screws, which I'm going to attempt to peel that back. There's no screws. There's just molding for some heat sinking. That's not what I expected when I felt that at all. Normally you feel a depression under a screw and oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Normally you feel something underneath a label and there's a screw hole there. Not the case here. Okay, so I pulled these 2 out and I pulled this one out, and I really want to see more of the information as to what's in here. Let me grab a small slotted driver here and poke and pry for a second. I'm sure this isn't good for its water resistance rating. Hmm. All right, and there we go. And now I can see 4 additional Phillips screws. Decent foam gasket here. This appears to be, I believe it says it has a microphone for audio recording. So I think if I pull these 4 Phillips screws, and once again, just for the sake of it, I'm going to use the included screwdriver. I should be able to look at the brains of the operation as it were. Now they didn't make it super difficult to get into that. It's just a piece of plastic trim that snaps on the front. although I'm pretty sure I have voided any warranty this particular unit came with in doing so. Good news is a little bit of clear silicone goes a long way for making things waterproof again. I can just put a bead of that around the edge when I reinstall that. And I should be good to go. These are really long screws. And they're fine thread. Two. There's a couple of reasons that I wanted to get in here. Number one, just to see how it's made. Number two, sometimes you find that certain elements are reasonable to replace. Sometimes lens elements can be repaired if they get damaged. Sometimes you find, wow. Sometimes you find that, so these diodes are just regular LEDs that can be swapped out. Oh. Sometimes you find it's relatively easy to replace the Ethernet cable. What is still holding this in? I don't want to... okay. So with that out, instead of this whole housing coming off like I thought, it looks like the actual array in the front here pops out. Which there's a screw hidden under there. I'm gonna be irritated if there is. Look at that. All right. And there's our rubber gasket. There's the controller board. And I am really impressed with some of what I'm seeing, but I need to undo a couple of these cables before I can really get into that. So let's let's see if I can without breaking them release these ribbon cables, which are going to be a bitch to get back in, but not impossible. Alright, so there's the ribbon cables, and then on this side, these two little leads which I assume control the LED arrays, and then because there's a little zip tie that I'm going to have to cut. One moment. For the record, I own smaller diagonal cutters for stuff exactly like this. I just don't bring them to work with me every day. Let's see if I can very gingerly clip the zip tie without pinching any of the delicate cables, just like that. Okay, so let's start with this cool module. I see a lot of things that I like here. Number one, the sensors are just attached to their own PCBs. So theoretically, if you had a couple of these and one of the sensors broke on one or whatever, you could take two dead cameras and make a good camera. It also means that if you wanted what I assume were probably standard 90 some odd degree camera sensors for a Raspberry Pi project or something like that, although I don't know what sensor exactly is in here, you're getting two sensors, a bunch of LEDs, and some decent lensing for $130. So from a repair perspective and a project perspective, this is great. I'm not going to take this apart any further for fear of damaging the actual optics, which I don't want to do, since I do want to see what kind of picture I get out of this. I don't want to risk misaligning the depth of the sensor to the included lens. But these are marked C8-8 E308301. If that means anything to anyone, they've also got a sticker on them that says JBN S05A10D/V100, and these particular modules have a date code of 5/28/22, so like 4 months ago. Not bad, means they're not sitting on the shelf forever. Inside here, I see a sticker that says XYD-VER1 N29C01-PV100, which presumably is the model. I don't see the actual SoC. I assume that's on the other side of this board. And let's see if that will come out. I do see the micro SD card slot and what looks to be a itty-bitty lithium-ion cell. And that is probably the part on this that I am most displeased with seeing. And I think that is something that some of the other vendors have learned to not do, just by virtue of making cameras longer than Reolink may have, especially like Panasonic. I see actual coin cells that I can change inside the camera body, as opposed to this. And if I can get it to where I will be able to show you this board, I'll explain why that's important in just a moment here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, here's our micro SD card slot. This is a connector that goes to what looks to be the LED arrays. This just looks to be power. This is a battery, and I'm not super thrilled seeing the battery, and the reason for that is that this battery has one of like 3 potential fates. Number one is that it just works fine forever, but I really wouldn't count on that. Number two, more likely, is that it dies, and because it is soldered to the board, is just unreplaceable. Therefore, you get a ton of clock drift. The real-time clock on this never works right again. And number three, which we see a lot with retro computing, is that it leaks and damages the board. Obviously, I would have liked either just like a capacitor on here that only has to keep the date for 5 minutes if there's a power outage, or a battery that I can replace. And obviously they considered accessibility in including the SD card slot as well as the reset button right there. So looking at the rest of this, this is a Novatech NT898, a Novatech NT98529BG SoC. And then we've got a couple of ribbon cables coming in here. Because there's a little bit of circuitry behind this, and what that circuitry is doing is it's converting everything to the voltages that this needs. Is this? This is still not going to come apart. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 more screws holding this piece of the body onto this piece. And all that is just PoE power conversion circuitry as well as an Ethernet adapter. Yeah, there's not a whole lot exciting there. There is a thermal pad for the Novatech chip, though, which is nice. And like I said, this is just DC to DC power conversion. And a desiccant pack, which is a nice touch. That should help if there is any moisture intrusion into this. Not that there should be, but there's always the potential for something somewhere to go horribly wrong. Anyway, so we've spent plenty of time tearing apart the PoE model, and I'm going to put that back together off camera. And let's just unbox the Wi-Fi one. Now I'm not going to tear the Wi-Fi one apart because it's going to be more of the same. The packaging looks pretty much identical. It does say Reolink. It does say Reolink Duo. To Wi-Fi, it notes that it's dual lens, wide viewing angle, which I discussed is marked as 150 degrees on their website. 2.4 and 5 gigahertz dual band Wi-Fi. That's important because a lot of devices like this are only 2.4 gigahertz. And you're going to need 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi if you're trying to push 4K video over it. Hell, I'm still stuck at 1080p trying to push NDI, although that's a whole separate issue. But basically the same stuff on the box, and I expect much of the same packaging once I get in here, although this one does have cute little Wi-Fi antennas on it. Same be prepared, be Reolink, same little package here, although there's a change. So they cut out this first page, or first piece of foam here, to include the two Wi-Fi antennas, which are actually different. They're both beveled differently. They probably could have saved themselves a few pennies and just squared these off, but those are actually different. And then here's the camera, and this is where things start to get a little bit different. So the PoE one, I had an Ethernet cable, which I get with the Wi-Fi one too. But I didn't get a power adapter extension cord, a power adapter, same mounting bracket, and then, yep, this is the same exact body with the addition of, I almost forgot to pull out my mounting hardware kit and free screwdriver. This is the same exact body, although it does say power DC 12 volt 2 amp. And the one thing that they did on these I wish they hadn't is it tells me the username on this sticker on the camera. So from a security standpoint, this sticker with the QR code and this sticker, which does include the power information, which could be useful, but also includes the default username, you probably want to remove just in case some schmuck steals your camera. Or decides to get up there on a ladder to play with things. One thing I'm curious about, I didn't expect the Wi-Fi model to still include a network cable. I want to plug that into PoE and see if it powers on at all. As expected, a whole lot of nothing out of the PoE switch in my office, which honestly, if there was room in this body, they could have just made a single camera. They could have made a PoE or Wi-Fi camera, and that probably would have made plenty of people happy. So let's see, where does that leave me? There's a couple of things I'm not fond of, and I would have liked to have seen done differently, but overall, barring anything going terribly wrong once I plug them in, these seem like pretty decent camera kits. The bodies, they're high density plastic. There is some aluminum in them. This black portion's aluminum that protects the lenses, but the body itself is some sort of fiberglass reinforced plastic. In fact, let's just double check that. Yeah. So we got fiberglass reinforced plastic there. No marks as to which one. Doesn't really matter. They're not impact or vandal rated, which is going to disqualify them from certain applications. One thing I would have liked to have seen is it looks like they just used the same pigtail coming off of the cameras. I would have liked to have seen the power connector, which is just another water intrusion point in most cases, excluded from the PoE model. They could have, and they didn't, and they don't include a plug for it either. So you've got this jack, which theoretically shouldn't be powered, but I've seen stranger things happen, which is a potential water intrusion point just hanging off the end of the pigtail. And this is not unique to Reolink. Amcrest does it, Hikvision does it. Everybody seems to like to include extra crap here when I have a PoE camera and I really just want it to be PoE. I would love to see someone either just exclude that, because I'm never going to use it, or start using a modular plug inside the camera, like, some of my Panasonic cameras, the actual connection for the Ethernet jack is inside the body of the camera. You plug your cable in, you seal the camera, and then it's just Cat6 coming out the back of it. That's a solution. Another solution would be to have this be modular, but you can still use your fancy breakouts for some of these have analog video and audio coming out of them. Bummed to see that the mounting bracket is exactly the same on these. I was hoping to see that one of these would include that extra lug, and I don't think there's any reason it wouldn't work. It seems like a missed opportunity that this really does just... Here, we'll grab the hex key that this came with. We'll use the Wi-Fi camera because I don't want to damage any of the cables in the PoE. We'll secure it down and then give it a turn. So I'm going to open that just a little. So that I can get to... So this is loose. Now I can tighten it down, and if I tighten it down and yank on it, I immediately knock it loose. Well, there we go. I finally got it tight enough that it doesn't immediately loosen, but I can break that with my finger. This is just a standard quarter 20, like I see in photography equipment. This is something that, like, the cheapest Amazon Basics tripods have a pin to stop rotation. So this is not something that Reolink had to invent the wheel over. They used an existing solution. They just only implemented part of it. Realistically, do I think it's a big deal? No, give it an extra quarter turn. Like I said, these aren't vandal rated, so you want to make sure they're up high enough that somebody can't reach up and mess with them anyway. But it is a point of concern observationally. So, anyway, I'm going to put the resolutions for these. I'm going to plug one of these in and get all the resolutions out of it in a chart when I get a chance in the section where I mentioned that they are supposed to be 4K cameras, but they don't specify 4K, 3840 by 2160 like you normally think, because they are 150 degree cameras, and there's a frame rate versus resolution trade-off there. So I'll throw a chart in there when I mention that, and maybe I'll edit a snippet in if it's really good or really bad. But anyway, that's a quick teardown on the PoE version and a little overview of what look like. These are not business grade cameras. They're good cameras, but these are small business and home consumer network security cameras. These aren't the kind of thing where you buy 5,000 of them for a football stadium. Um, Reolink themselves sell, it looks like, 8 and 16 channel NVRs. Yeah, 4, 8, and 16. So, which actually there was no NVR note with the Wi-Fi one. It may not support their NVRs. It may be app only. They do have a cloud subscription service. I'll be taking a look at that. Not a huge fan of clouds. I'm inclined to suggest people who, if you need something more than the basic NVRs offer, definitely look at doing it yourself. Blue Iris is my preferred solution. But obviously, there's things like ZoneMinder and iSpy that plenty of people are happy with, and certain NAS units even have NVR options as well. And maybe we'll get a look at one of those at some point. But anyway, bringing it back to these, they look well enough built. They look thought out fairly well. There's a couple of things like these mounts that I just wish they had gone that extra mile to do. I don't know if you could really vandal-proof a body design like this. Usually when you see vandal-resistant cameras, they're domes. It's just a much stronger structure, much harder to break. So, all of that said, I do want to once again say that Reolink did send these out for review, so I want to thank Reolink for doing that. If you have questions or comments about the cameras, something you want to see me test once I get them powered on, let me know. I'm going to put that one back together off camera, and we're going to torture test these as well. I'd like to thank Electrix for providing our opening and closing themes. As always, I'd like to thank anyone who helps support Pocketables, either by using our Amazon affiliate links or by subscribing on Patreon. It is support like that that helps make videos like this possible. I'd like to invite anyone who wants to be a little more interactive in the comment section to go ahead and join us on Discord. There'll be a link to that in the description below. And finally, thank you for watching.